This is The Jason Jones Show, powered by Mudhouse Media. Now, here's Jason Jones.
Aloha, everybody, and welcome to The Jason Jones Show. I am your host, Jason Jones, broadcasting from the beautiful hill country of Texas. Beautiful and free. You need to come here. Today is a special show, guys. It was 9. First of all, we're interviewing Steve Bannon. Okay? And well, actually, Steve Bannon's interviewing me. And I was on his show. He's a busy guy. So we're going to make that the show today. And we talk about Andrew Breitbart and a new article that I just published today on items made by Christians and Uyghur slaves in China in your local Christian bookstore. So that's what today's show is. But I didn't get to, it's Steve Bannon's The War Room. I did not get to talk enough about my dear friend, Andrew Breitbart. And so I'm going to share a story that up until recently I've only shared with a few close friends, but I think I can share it now. First of all, Andrew Breitbart was a good friend of mine, but he had a lot of good friends. He had a large, I'm part of a large charmed circle of people who had the privilege of being friends with Andrew. And this is the story I've never told before. So Andrew and I were Andrew was developing a reality show, and he wanted me to be a part of it. And it was where Andrew, myself, a Colombian actress, and a friend of ours who is a Sufi Muslim, black guy, mohawk, tattoos everywhere, piercings everywhere, was committed to chastity and was just very conservative. I mean, to the right of all of us, for sure. But he was a kind, gentle, beautiful guy. And so it was going to be the four of us traveling the country in a Winnebago. So we were developing this while Andrew passed. And after Whitney Houston passed away, Andrew and I met. And this really struck him. This really hurt him. What upset Andrew so much about the Whitney Houston story was that, and now you're not going to believe this. You're going to have to Google this because it seems unbelievable, but it's true. After she died in her bathtub and she was found, her quote-unquote friends continued on with their party. And, Andrew was kind of a Hollywood kid. That's how I always saw him, is childlike, filled with joy, always happy. You'd be happy around him. And he just kind of danced across the planet Earth. And so I always saw him as this kid from Hollywood, even though he was older than me. And he always wanted to talk to me about 80s punk rock. He thought I was into 80s punk rock. I never said that I was. I never contradicted him. And he would just go on and on. Because I love when people talk about the little things they're interested in, right? We all do. That's why when I talk about Muay Thai in the show, I know it doesn't bother you. It's interesting hearing anyone talk about whatever it is they love. And so when he would talk about 80s punk, I loved it. And, but anyways, I digress. So he knew a lot of the people at that party where when Whitney Houston died, and just continued partying. And up until this point, Andrew would always say, I'm not religious. I'm the cleanup batter on the Judeo-Christian baseball team. I'm the cleanup hitter. That's what he would say. And he loved baseball. And he would always talk to me about baseball. And him and his buddy Larry were always talking about baseball. Whenever they were together, they would talk about baseball. I'm telling you, when I spent time with Andrew, we never talked about politics. Very rarely. Almost never. I don't really remember. Remember talking about theology, philosophy, sports, music. But again, the digression continues. I apologize. So Andrew and our meeting, Whitney Houston had just passed away, and it's just, I think, a couple of weeks before Andrew's going to return to our Lord. And Andrew says something to me, and what I'm going to share with you, I have never shared publicly, and I'll tell you why I think it's okay for me to share. Andrew said, Jason, he's like, I realized I'm a Christian. I said, when I read this story, at that moment, I realized what attracts me to the Tea Party movement and all these other things, it's the heart of what Christianity is. I'm a Christian. And so when we do our reality show and we travel around the country, I want to get baptized in every denomination. I want to go to every church we go to, Methodist, Baptist, Catholic, Orthodox. Each episode, I want to get baptized. Okay, so I tried to explain to him. I said, Andrew, you can't do that. Like, we all accept one baptism, right? They're only going to baptize you once. I promise you, brother, you only need to get baptized once. He goes, no, I don't want to choose a denomination. I just want to be a Christian. And so to show that, I want to get back. So I tried to explain it to him, and he yeah-ed me when I said it. But what this tells me, what was so beautiful about Andrew Breitbart is he felt so deeply the suffering of other people and never wanted anyone to be othered, to be outcast. So when Clarence Thomas, you probably know the story, it's well known, his inciting incident to the life, the political life, the life of the city, living a life of politics. The inciting incident, and the reason why he saw culture is so important, and I say that Andrew Breitbart's inciting incident was the beginning of cancel culture. It was the destruction of Clarence Thomas. This was the beginning of cancel culture. This, seeing a hardworking, thoughtful, committed, good man being destroyed, even though at the time Andrew didn't identify with him politically, this broke Andrew's heart. This woke him up. And this is where the warrior was born. So Whitney Houston being abandoned by the beautiful people that have all the right positions on everything, the right morals of the age, leaving their friend to molt in a bathtub. In many ways, I say that Whitney Houston in a bathtub was Andrew Breitbart's baptism. He never was baptized. He had the baptism of desire, right? So why did he want to be baptized in every denomination? Well, because he didn't want to be separate from anyone. And the reason why I feel it's okay to tell this story, I always said I wasn't going to tell the story. And I told like 2 friends, and I said, don't tell anyone. And well, you know how that goes, right? Don't tell anyone. Well, one day I get a phone call, and it's Orson Bean. The Orson Bean. Like the most charming, winsome man of all time. And so Orson Bean calls me, and I can tell it's on speakerphone, and he yells at me. I've had like 3 conversations with this guy in my life. And he's kind of like, where is Andrew? And he keeps saying it. And I'm tearing up when he's saying this. Like, Orson, you know where he is. He said, is Andrew in heaven? Now, I knew Andrew was Jewish, and I didn't really know his family's religion, his wife or his in-laws. I didn't know. So I didn't, I didn't know what he was talking. I said, Orson, I'm so confused. He said, so-and-so, a friend of mine, told me that Andrew told you he wanted to be baptized, and you told him that as a Catholic, you believe that's good enough because it's baptism of desire. And did Andrew say that to you? So now I'm scared to death, right? I'm thinking, are they mad at me? So I said, Orson, I don't go around baptizing the dead. I just told this to a few close friends. And, but yes, that is what Andrew said to me. And then it was on speakerphone. And I hear the whole family just cheer and like laugh. And they're so happy. And they're like, thank you, Jason. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Jason. And then they hang up on me. And so I feel it's okay to tell this story now. But why this story is so important is it is all you need to know about Andrew Breitbart. He entered politics because he saw a man being brutalized by the people in power. And I believe at the end, like he entered eternity really thoughtful of God because of what happened to Whitney Houston. And I believe that the gospel at its core is not being able to stand to tolerate those being shunned, not being able to allow lepers to be outcasts, whether it's because of a disease, that's, physical, or whether it's because of disease that is cultural. And we have an epidemic much worse than COVID today, and that's cancel culture. And cancel culture, Andrew would say, politics is upstream of culture. I'm sorry, culture is upstream of politics. Can you tell I have quick coffee? Culture is upstream of politics. Cancel culture is the worst epidemic we've ever faced, really. It's a cultural revolution. The culture of creating lepers to shun lepers. Andrew is an example of how to live one's life. In Aristotle's The Ethics, he talks about a word that is often translated as prudence, but what it really means isn't prudence the way when we hear prudence, like be prudent, don't do that, be prudent, it's dangerous, there's a social cost, be prudent. We have a donor class that's prudent, and they fund politicians and PACs that are quote unquote prudent. By the way, we mean the word, but that is not what Aristotle meant. The word that's mistranslated, I believe, there's no real way to translate this word. What it meant is taking action, organizing your activity to the good, the true, and the beautiful. And in the political life, that means ordering your life for the noble. Aristotle said this is almost a divine virtue, inaccessible to even reason. Order your life to the noble, the true, the good, the beautiful. And there's nothing more noble than choosing to stand with those who are being outcast. And so in a way, Andrew Breitbart is a political saint. He's an example. He's a role model. Now, of course, those who like to virtue signal and create lepers, to destroy lepers, to shun lepers, they have painted a picture of Andrew Breitbart that is so far removed from the truth. And those, you can just read his writings, you can watch his interviews, and you can see a kind, gentle man who is full of life. And I haven't written much about Andrew since he passed, because one of the thoughts I've had is I wanted to be sensitive to the fact that when your husband or father or brother is someone like Andrew Breitbart, you had to share him in life with the world. And maybe in death, you want him to yourself. But the truth is, Andrew shared his life with the world, and I want the world to know who he is. And a lot of you young folks or people who aren't politically involved a decade ago may not know much about Andrew. You got to get his book. You got to watch the movie Hating Breitbart. You need to research this guy. He's someone you need to know. Andrew Breitbart is someone you need to know. And I count it as one of the great blessings of my life that I got to be his friend. What an unbelievable blessing. And I'm going to say this now. Of the 3 or 4 most beautiful humans of my era, I think they're my close friends. And Andrew is one of them. I mean, and really the greatest example. A noble man. I wrote in his obituary for Breitbart.com, and I'm going to put it in the show notes. I had the privilege of writing his obituary. That meeting him was like meeting Bruce Lee or Bob Marley. And my editor added the line, I'm embarrassed to say meeting him was like meeting Bruce Lee or Bob Marley. I wasn't embarrassed to say that. I'm like, why did you put that? He's like, it's an embarrassing thing to say. I'm like, okay. He's like, you're a weird guy. I got to put that in there for other people because it's just a weird thing to say. But I don't think it's weird. I think meeting Andrew Breitbart, is like meeting Bruce Lee or Bob Marley. I have no other way of saying it. He was that kind of guy. And in fiction, he was a historical person, but his representation is completely fictitious. Meeting him, really, he reminded me of Cyrano de Bergerac. I watch the French Cyrano from the early 90s all the time, and just because it reminds me of Andrew. Just a big, bold, beautiful, happy warrior who cannot stand to see people othered. David Mamet wrote, or he said in his master class on writing, that he writes because his teeth itch. And I think Andrew's teeth itched, knowing people were suffering injustice, and he couldn't bear it. and he lived his life. He lived 100 years in less than, 43 years? He lived 100 years in 42 years, 43 years. He lived a big, beautiful life. But you're here because you want to hear Steve Bannon, and I am blessed to have been on the War Room today, and they're sending me, they sent me over the file, and so that's the show. The show is me on the War Room. You need to follow the War Room. If you're not already, Steve Bannon's the War Room. He's been doing a lot of great work on persecution of Christians at home. He just did a special on persecution of Christians around the world, and he's got a special coming up on anti-Semitism. And so again, what does this all have in common? Faithful Christians, faithful Jews, people of faith stand with those who are othered. So people of faith are always going to be othered. Because if you choose to stand with the people society is turned against, it's going to turn against you. And so it's no surprise in the cancel culture, we're seeing the rise of anti-Semitism. We're seeing persecution against Christians like never before. The place to follow all of this is the War Room. Okay, this episode is being brought to you by Movie to Movement. Go watch our movie, Divided Hearts of America, at movietomovement.com. You can click through and see all the places you can download it. This episode is also being brought to you by the Vulnerable People Project, standing in solidarity with the most vulnerable people in the world, shoulder to shoulder. Go to thegreatcampaign.org. For a donation of $20 or more, you get a free copy of my book with John Zmirak, The Race to Save Our Century.
Okay, now with closing in on 39 million downloads on the podcast, remember that's the fifth way you can get it. We'd love everybody out there in this audience, if you could please sign up for the podcast and give us a review. What we'd love is to sign up for the podcast. Even if you listen to all the other methodologies, just go. It's all free. Everything here is free. Just go there and sign up for the podcast. It's now today's the 9th anniversary of the passing away of really a giant of this movement, a guy who was irreplaceable, and that was Andrew Breitbart. Now I want to bring in one of his closest friends. You know him as the filmmaker, the great conservative, traditionalist, Catholic filmmaker, Jason Jones. Jason, you join us from Texas today or from Hawaii? Where are we getting you from?
I'm in the beautiful hill country of Texas today, Steve.
It doesn't get any better than that. Andrew Breitbart, a giant among men, not just physically, but what he meant for this movement and who he was and how much he gave of everything, right? His whole person as being everything to throw into this fight. And it's ironic. He finished CPAC, and I mean, Andrew was known as just being a dominant personality in those years at CPAC. Jason, what are your memories?
Yeah, well, it was almost 9 years ago to this hour. It was 5:30 a.m. where a young man who worked for me called me and shared with the news. And I have so many beautiful memories with Andrew. CPAC, he'd walk through CPAC, and everyone would light up around him. You would know where Andrew was by the smiles on everyone's face. People would glow in the presence of Andrew. But I think my best memory was just a few months before he passed away. Andrew and I were featured extras in the movie Atlas Shrugged. And when you're an extra, you just have a lot of time to talk. And so Andrew, myself, and my daughter, we sat around talking about Ayn Rand and objectivism, but more importantly, with Andrew, we talked about God and how Ayn Rand couldn't recognize the source of the beauty of the human person, which she was a great advocate for the human person, but she could never recognize the source. So being able to spend that day so close to his returning to the Lord, talking about God, is a beautiful memory I have.
Raheem, when you met Andrew, it was also at CPAC, right?
Yeah, look, I mean, I met him in passing at an event once, but my memory of him was when he physically passed by me. We were standing at the Marriott Wardman Hotel. It was during CPAC, and
the old days.
Occupy people were outside. And we were asked, I don't know if it was hotel security or event, whatever, we were asked as young activists to kind of form a line at the door to stop them charging the back doors of the Marriott. Well, remember they had that old ramp up to the hotel, You could just walk straight in. And we formed a line. It was actually some of my buddies from England and me. We formed a line, and we were just kind of standing there waiting to kind of try and stop anybody coming in. The line was breached from behind. Somebody barged through us and ran out and started screaming at the Occupy people. And I learned later that person was Andrew Breitbart.
Well, we were making Occupy Unmasked. If you want to see much about Antifa and really Andrew's a deep knowledge of this movement. We made the film, and in fact, Andrew passed away in the middle of filming. You wouldn't know that from the finished product because we have filmed so much of Andrew, but he understood the Antifa radical nature, the anarchy, the nature of the anarchists on the other side at a very deep level. I mean, Andrew was it was not just the physical presence and the humor and the humanity. He was literally a genius when it came to, because he'd been an editor at Drudge for many years and also Huffington Post. He understood how people came to the news, right? His thing was he understood how people came to news, right. and with social media, he was so far ahead of the mainstream media in this regard. It was quite extraordinary. So we're going to do something also at 5 o'clock to commemorate this day. 9 years ago today, a giant, and will never be replaced, can't be replaced. There's certain people that come along that you just can't. It's like Rush Limbaugh, Andrew Breitbart. These are giants upon whom shoulders we stand, right? I want to go now. You've got a breaking story on I think, the stream. Talk to us about the slave labor camps in China, and is product inadvertently getting into what's this about Christian bookstores, Christian product in the slave labor camps of China, Jason?
Well, I thank you, gentlemen, for covering this topic. I've already received, the article just dropped a few hours ago, and I've received dozens of emails from Christian bookstore owners saying they've looked into their stores and they're appalled to see how many products are from China. Many other bookstore owners said they've made a concerted effort not to buy products that are made in China, but it's almost impossible. The sad truth is, thanks to some great investigative reporting, that now we've discovered that so many of these products that we have in our Christian bookstores are made by Christian slaves. And Ambassador Brownback has talked about this for years. And now we're finding more and more products are made in the camps where Turkic Muslims, the Uyghur people, are in these camps making products like plaques that say, the Lord will set you free. And that plaque that you have hanging in your Christian bookstore was made by slave labor. And Steve, you always talk about this as an activist audience. You've talked a lot about the importance of precincts. When I would run political campaigns in the days before social media, my first stop was the local Christian bookstore. I'd go to whatever district it was in the country. I'd go to the local Christian bookstore and say, do you have a list of your best customers? I know those were going to be my organizers and activists. You have to go to your local Christian bookstore. It's the beating heart of our community. It's where the people of all the different denominations come together, and the most faithful and active people in their communities. If we cannot have Christian bookstores free of products made in China by slaves, there's no hope for Apple. There's no hope for Coca-Cola and Costco and Nike. So let's start. This is an activist audience. I think this is something that we can really do to send a strong message that we are not going to have any products in any Christian bookstore in this country made in China, because there is no way to certify whether or not these products were in fact made by slaves.
So how do people get to this? How do people get engaged? How do they get involved? And just one thing, how are you certain that it's made by the Uyghurs? Because a lot of product, look, I don't like the fact of how they oppress Lao Beijing in their factories and pay them virtually slave wages, right? But then you've got the camps of the Uyghurs. When you say the slave labor of Christians, are you saying that there are camps like that Christians are in with the Uyghurs? Are there some are there? Or just define that so we make sure that this is fact-based.
Well, no, what's something is I work very closely with the Uyghur community, and they're always appreciative of my work. And I get all of these emails from Uyghur expatriates who thank me and say, Jason, you're Catholic. How come you don't speak enough about the Catholics that are in these camps with us, these other Christians that have been in the camps with us? So this is something I've had personally from eyewitness testimony. Because there are 3 million ethnic and religious minorities in the Uyghur in these camps, it really captivates us. It captures our attention. But the reality is there are lots of Christians and others, I'm sure there are a lot of atheists in these forced labor camps having their organs harvested.
Falun
Gong. And so there are all of these different ethnic and religious minorities and people in these camps for all sorts of reasons. Because the Uyghur genocide is really the greatest genocide since the Shoah, it captures our attention. But we have to know, and this is something we've known for a long time. And one thing we need
are they going to talk, by the way, are they going to talk when the Pope, you're going to be back on the show later in the week when the Pope, my favorite Pope, Pope Francis, when he goes, I think he's going to Iraq this week. Are they going to talk about the slave labor camps in China of the Muslims that are being oppressed? Are they going in Iraq? Are they going to join? Are the Pope in and the leaders of the Islam faith, the Muslim faith, they're going to meet in Iraq? Are they going to talk about the Chinese Communist Party and the slave labor camps of Muslims in Western China? Is that going to be a topic for conversation, do you think, Jason Jones?
Maybe in 5 or 6 years after we have the camps closed, they'll be very confident that they'll talk about it. I have an article coming out later in the week addressing the Pope's silence during the genocide of Christians and Yazidis and others in Iraq at the hands of ISIS, when you and President Trump, supposedly the bad guys, were the only people in the world fighting for these ethnic and religious minorities. Our Pope was silent. I was in Iraq, miles from ISIS, in an IDP camp, and an Orthodox priest crying was asking me, where are the Western Christians? Why is the Pope beaming? This is what he said to me. Why is the Pope, your Pope, he was Orthodox, beaming images of wild animals from Africa on the walls of St. Peter with Al Gore, and not beaming images of these children that surround you? And I said, I have no answer for that. So now the Pope is there. Thanks to President Trump and his administration, the caliphate was near obliterated. Now it's making a comeback. But look, I'm challenging the Pope there to apologize for his silence in the midst of the genocide, to say never again and mean it. He's meeting with some very beautiful people that have been very courageous. And I hope that he has courage to apologize. We have a lot of people apologizing for things they had nothing to do with. Nike's making slaves with using slaves to make shoes. Well, they're virtue signaling for slavery in the 19th century in the United States. I would like to see the Pope go there, apologize for his confusion and silence, and then speak up for the Uyghur, speak up for the Catholics. But there's the secret deal with China that as a Catholic, as a lay Catholic man, I don't know the terms of this deal. And so I'm not hopeful. But you know what, Steve? We have you. We have the war room. We have I think the most powerful force in the world today can be the lay Catholic, because lay Catholics in America, we should force our church to speak up on these issues. And if we stand up and demand,
we had Pam Pryor here from the State Department. Pam Pryor was under Pompeo. She was here in studio with us on Saturday with Frank Gaffney. We had a faith base, but we try to also focus on the persecution of Christians, which is the greatest persecution of Christians in the history of the faith going on right now globally throughout the world, from Africa to Asia, to certain areas of Latin America, but potentially Asia, China, and in sub-Saharan Africa. Tomorrow, and Raheem, I think we're going to do it at 5 o'clock in the afternoon now. Yeah. At 5 o'clock tomorrow, we're going to do another 1 hour special. This is the persecution of the Jews of Europe and the rise of anti-Semitism globally. And we're going to have Rabbi Sparrow. I think we're going to have God Sad on. We're going to have a group. Raheem, this is a topic Raheem actually led the charge on at Breitbart London for years and years and years, talking about what was going on in Europe. And so we're going to get the persecution of the Jews of Europe and the rise of anti-Semitism as a global phenomenon are going to be tomorrow. It's going to be 5 o'clock or entire hour. We'll be getting you up to date on the news as we always do, but we're turning that over to a 1 hour special. All week, in fact, we're talking about the persecution of faith-based communities throughout the world. This is one thing the mainstream media does not want to cover, and the detail it needs to be covered on. And we got to start calling people out. The first people got to be called out, I think, are the Gulf Emirates and countries like Persia and these others about what's going on with the Uyghur, the Chinese Communist Party, who's in business with the mullahs would not exist if the Chinese Communist Party was not financing them. They're financing them. They're buying the oil, right? Long-term contracts. They're supplying their military with military equipment. They are trying to consolidate their hold on the Eurasian landmass. And Pakistan's a partner. The mullahs in Iran are partners. Turkey, Russia now today. Obviously got the vassal state of North Korea, but in this process, there is a massive persecution of faith-based people. And what's outrageous to me is that the Pope is going to Iraq this week. You haven't heard any word, Jason, at all about concentration camps of the Uyghurs, of millions of Muslims that are being persecuted by the atheistic, materialistic dictatorship in Beijing. That would be the Chinese Communist Party. Jason, we got about a minute. How do people get access to you? Because I know the live chat's blowing up right now. They want to know how people can follow you during the day and know more about you.
Thank you, Steve. My website is movietomovement.com, or if you want to stand with us and stand with the vulnerable, go to thegreatcampaign.org, and my podcast is The Jason Jones Show. I want to bring this back to Andrew Breitbart. Andrew was birthed by cancel culture when they tried to cancel Clarence Thomas. I think the organizing principle for me, in my activism is standing with those who you try to other. Cancel culture at home. This is the cultural revolution. Doxing children, doxing young women for a dance they went to 3 or 4 years ago. I mean, this is unbelievable. We need to stand with those who are being othered. You talk about the rise of anti-Semitism. Whenever scapegoating and othering happens, you know anti-Semitism is right around the corner. If we don't, we need to stand with whoever they're othering, from cancel culture to the Uyghurs in China. And this is something Andrew Breitbart, this is how he lived his life.
Defense of the Judeo-Christian West for the good of all mankind. Okay, short commercial break.
All right, guys, that was me on the War Room being interviewed by Steve Bannon on China, and of course, my hero Andrew Breitbart. I want to share with you one more Andrew Breitbart story. Okay, so since I was in junior high when I first read Anthem, I was a Randian. I was really mesmerized by the writings of Ayn Rand as a young man. Also, I'd read by Kurt Vonnegut, Harrison Bergeron, and that same teacher in 7th or 8th grade changed my life with that short story and that little novella. But I had always dreamed of being in Atlas Shrugged. That was really my dream, and I wanted to play Ragnar. But whatever, I'm tall and blonde. I thought I'd be a great Ragnar. I didn't get the part, but I did help a friend of mine who was auditioning land the role, and he said, "Hey, you want to be a featured extra in the movie?" And I said, "Yeah, can my daughter and Andrew Breitbart also come with me and be featured extras?" He said, "Of course." So Andrew Breitbart and I and my daughter played the mayor's aides. And if you see the movie Atlas Shrugged, you'll see Andrew Breitbart, my daughter, and I playing the mayor's aide in Dagny Taggart's party. So Dagny throws this beautiful party, and there's Andrew and I in tuxes with my daughter next to the mayor. Anyway, so that was great. But when you're an extra, as I talked about with Steve, you get a lot of downtime. And Andrew was asking me, how did I go from being an Ayn Rand objectivist to a Christian? And I had said, well, I never was satisfied with Ayn Rand's answer that she had such an exalted view of the human person, right? She was like Nietzsche, but she saw everyone as the overman. She saw everyone as having this magnificent beauty and dignity, or at least that's how I read her. Reading Ayn Rand helped me see everyone as exalted, right? And but her answer to the source of human dignity would always be, it's self-evident, it's axiomatic, and it's an irreducible truth. I was never happy with that answer, and that's what I said to Andrew. I said, when I graduated college, I wrote some of my goals, and one of my goals was to develop Ayn Rand an objectivist anthropology, an anthropology of the human person grounded in objectivist philosophy, or that would, rooted in is an atheist. And it was really through reading, and I was telling this to Andrew, it was through reading Sartre and Nietzsche and Freud that really eroded any hope for seeing a vision of the human person that, to me, with Ayn Rand, that I saw as self-evident. And outside of the sacred Jewish and Christian scriptures, I couldn't find it anywhere. And so I was at first a very reluctant convert to Christianity. And we spent the whole day talking about God. And it was such a beautiful day to be there with my daughter and Andrew, and then, of course, all the other extras. And when you're in Hollywood, a lot of the extras were retirees, and we were talking to a guy and his wife. He was a plumber, and him and his wife liked to be extras, and they were joining in the conversation with us. And there we are in a ballroom. Can you imagine this, folks? And in the ballroom is James Taggart and Dagny Taggart and Henry Reardon and all the great characters in Atlas Shrugged are all around us. And there we are eating our box lunch, talking about God. Such a beautiful experience that I am so grateful for. Now, again, I said most of you are probably great admirers of Andrew. For those of you who've only been in politics or involved in politics for a couple of years, you don't know much about him. Read his book, watch the movie Hating Breitbart, and just Google around. Go on YouTube and see some of his old interviews. and you'll see what a magnificent human being he was. In the age of cancel culture, he's someone we should really look up to because he never took a knee to the mob, and he always ran to the rescue of those he saw being assaulted by the mob. He's a great hero. This episode, as always, is being brought to you by Movie to Movement, creating a culture of life, love, and beauty through the power of film. Go to movieToMovement.com to check out our latest film, Divided Hearts of America, with Super Bowl champ Benjamin Watson. It's a documentary that reveals the secret that will unite this country. Also being brought to you by The Great Campaigner, the Vulnerable People Project, and The Great Campaign. Go to thegreatcampaign.org and stand shoulder to shoulder with the most vulnerable people in the world. Go to thegreatcampaign.org, and for a donation of $20, you get a copy of my book with John Zmirak, The Race to Save Our Century. And as always, we're being brought to you by MyPillow. Go to mypillow.com for deep discounts. You know you want to stand shoulder to shoulder with Mike Lindell, and you want to rest your head on the best pillow in the world. Go to mypillow.com for deep discounts. Until next time, The Jason Jones Show.
This has been The Jason Jones Show, powered by Mudhouse Media.